Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Mark Fowler. I'm the CEO of the Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding. On behalf of our team, it's my pleasure to welcome you all to Tanenbaum's 6th annual and 2nd virtual Religious Diversity Leadership Summit. I'd like to begin with a land acknowledgement, an intentional naming of this space in which we live and work, part of a broader effort to decolonize our gathering spaces. Like many of you tuning in from New York City area, where Tanenbaum's offices are located, including myself in my home in Flatbush, Brooklyn, we find ourselves living, working, and connecting on the ancestral lands of the Munsee Lenape Nation. We pay respect to the elders past and present who care for this region. We acknowledge that like so many, we have the privilege of resources from ceded and unceded land and from the settler colonial system. I encourage you to identify the Indigenous connection to where you are, noting that it is not only limited to the United States. For those of you that might be new to this work, Tanenbaum is a secular, non-sectarian not-for-profit. Our mission is to combat religious prejudice, to promote justice, and build respect for religious difference. We do our work in education, with education providers, teachers, and school systems. We do our work with healthcare institutions, medical professionals, and hospitals and healthcare settings, and in peace building, looking at the role of religiously motivated peace actors working in conflict zones around the world, and certainly our work in workplaces, which you all are experiencing today. Tanenbaum began its pioneering work in exploring the role of religion in workplaces in 1997, 25 years ago. And this is a special year for Tanenbaum, as it represents the 10th anniversary of our membership program. What started with just a few companies committed to addressing religious diversity, equity, and inclusion work now represents a rich global network of close to 70 leading organizations in industries such as tech, pharmaceuticals, entertainment, and finance, just to name a few. It's also the 30th anniversary of Tanenbaum as an organization. 30 years ago, the Tanenbaum Center for Interreligious Understanding was founded by Dr. Georgette Bennett to build on the legacy of her late husband, Rabbi Mark Tanenbaum, a pioneer in the field of interreligious relations. At the time of the loss, Dr. Bennett imagined how the legacy of Rabbi Tanenbaum's work could continue reaching people directly where they were to encourage behaviors of respect. The theme of this year's summit, Imagine, Create, Build, Embrace Religious Diversity, is adapted from our 30th anniversary directive of Imagine, Create, Build. Over the next 30 years, Tanenbaum will raise the bar on what behaviors of respect can look like in education, in healthcare, in peace building, and at work. And I'd also like to acknowledge our generous sponsors, without whom this programming would not be possible. The Walt Disney Company, Alliance Bernstein, Merck Company, Microsoft, and Target. And now I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Celeste Warren. Celeste is Vice President, Global Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence. As the leader for Merck's Global Diversity and Inclusion Center for Excellence, she is responsible for working with Merck's global leaders to advance and embed diversity and inclusion throughout the organization to enhance the employee experience and maximize business performance. Celeste joined Merck in 1997 and has held numerous positions of increasing responsibility within the organization. Prior to joining Merck in 1997, Celeste worked for 9 years at Kraft Foods Incorporated and General Foods. She has been honored with many awards, including Black Enterprise's Top Executives in Global Diversity and Inclusion, Savoy Magazine's Most Influential Women in Corporate America, Women's E-News 21 Leaders for the 21st Century, Diversity Global Magazine's Influential Women in Global Diversity, and Diversity Woman magazine's Elite 100 list. She serves on the boards of the R.W.J. Barnabas Health Systems and All In Together, and Merck's Political Action Committee. She is also a member of CNBC's Workforce Executive Council and World 50's Inclusion and Diversity Impact Community. Celeste's articles on diversity, equity, and inclusion have been featured in numerous national and global publications, and she has had the opportunities to speak at various events across the world. Please help me welcome, and let me turn this now over to my friend, Celeste Warren.
Well, thank you, Tanenbaum, for the invitation to speak at this prestigious event. I'm very honored to be your partner and your colleague, and being able to talk a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the important role of interfaith diversity within global organizations. As he stated, my name is Celeste Warren, and I lead Merck's Global Diversity and Inclusion Center of Excellence. Religion and faith continue to play an increasingly important role in diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have seen through the course of the past few years especially, that when you look at different issues that are happening from a social standpoint, from a political standpoint, from an economic standpoint, the issues of religion and faith seem to be integrated into those issues, whether that be about abortion rights or COVID or opening up churches or various different faiths across the globe. Religion and faith will continue to play a very, very important role in our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Just to share a few external statistics, we know that the areas of religious change has really grown over the last few decades. You can see by that graphic in the top how different faiths have grown over the course of the decades. And then also, when we think about religious bias complaints, they have increased as well over the decades. And then also, with all of this, among the Fortune 100 companies, there are only a few companies that have employee resource groups that are dedicated or related to faith or belief, even though most companies have other resource groups that are dedicated to things like race and gender and other different dimensions of diversity. Only a few have them that are related to faith or belief. One of the things that's really, really interesting when we think about religion and faith, it's evolving. How people view religion and faith seems to be evolving, both inside the workforce and outside of the workforce generally. People are shifting their underlying religious and spiritual instincts to new and different outlets. Growth in religious entities has been most apparent among churches and religious groupings that fall outside of the sphere of what we call organized or more formalized religion. When you ask Americans specifically about are they affiliated with a particular religion, many of them will say that they're not really affiliated with a religion, but they're spiritual. And so there seems to be a decline around organized religion. And that can be attributed to a lot of different things, you know, from a political standpoint, from the standpoint of how people are thinking about religion and how the aspect or the thinking about people being spiritual and morally spiritual and how that has come into play. But we've seen that people are in a way moving away from the more traditional organized religion to other aspects of spirituality. And then generational changes in religiosity happen consistently to every generation as they age and are not specific to a particular time period or cohort. And what we mean by that is many people they might be raised in the church as they were children growing up. And then as they get into their college years or young adult years, they tend to maybe pull away. And then as they get older and they start having children and families, many tend to come back to the religion or spirituality or faith. And we see that is pretty consistent across all of generations. It's not something that's generation specific. And then the relationship between religion and politics is becoming even more and more complex. It used to be that from a political standpoint, those that were running for office, they knew pretty much that more traditional religions, the different stands that they took and the issues that they were attached to, and they could play to that base and play to those issues. Now, with the advent of more millennials that are voting, they don't really link to an organized religion, more so in that generation, with the issues that when it comes to interfaith, as I talked about in that first slide, the issues of faith and politics, they're varying, and all of those issues surrounding them are issues around faith. And so the politicians and those that are in politics, they're having a challenging time with how it used to be, where they could really just say, well, I'm going to play to this religious base. And it's just not as easy anymore because there's such a diversity that exists in the interfaith community. And so it makes it kind of challenging. And there's more leaders in the religious leaders that are coming out and speaking and favoring different political issues and talking about politics more and more and more. So we're starting to see those lines blur just a little bit. But even with the increasing complexity of religion and faith, the majority of Fortune 100 companies still fail to include religious diversity as part of diversity efforts. And many companies still don't understand the business case for workplaces to focus on religious inclusion. With everything that we talked about in this previous slide, with the complexities that exist, with the different diversity that exists across faith, and all of the different areas and dimensions of diversity and the intersectionality of it, there still is this thinking that that's something that we just don't want to really touch, or they don't integrate it as a formidable part of their diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And that is a mistake, because we know that you have to make sure, if you have a truly inclusive diversity and inclusion strategy, then it should comprise all the dimensions of diversity, not just a select few. You have to approach it from a multidimensional approach. And that is what makes your more successful diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And so we have to integrate religion and interfaith into our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. It is what we have to do if we want to be inclusive. It is what we have to do if we're truly going to have a formidable and a strategy that is going to encompass all of the dimensions of diversity of the employees that exist within your corporation. It is truly, truly imperative. And as I said earlier, all of the issues that exist externally in the world, many of them, if you look at that issue, wrapped around it is an issue that is dealing with faith or religion. They all have a point of view around various different issues that exist from a social standpoint, political standpoint, and economic standpoint. And if we don't fully understand that, then we won't have a successful diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. And so that's why it's very, very important that we integrate faith and religion into our strategies. The impact of religion and faith is going to continue to be a cornerstone of diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. The responsibility of companies is expanding. It's not just about the bottom line, the top line, and in our cases, our pipeline. It's about also all of those different aspects that involve responsibility, involve corporate and social responsibility as well. And we know that investors and shareholders and employees are asking questions about the culture of the organization. And the culture of the organization is comprised of the people and how they can bring their authentic selves to work. That's a component of it. And if people from different faiths do not feel comfortable coming into the workplace and feeling comfortable about coming into the workplace and feeling authentic and being able to bring their whole selves to work, then we're not going to have a very, very effective strategy. And the responsibility of companies around issues in the social aspect and in the social realm, involving faith, involving all of those different issues that are coming to the forefront, we have to make sure that we're prepared as companies to be able to face those many, many issues. And silence in a lot of different cases is not acceptable. And so it becomes really, really important that we understand that our responsibility as corporations is expanding beyond just the bottom line. We have to answer questions about how our culture is and what we're doing to make sure that we have an inclusive culture. And that means inclusive of all the dimensions of diversity, including faith and religion. It's also an important impact on our workforce. As I was saying, our employees want to work in an environment where they can feel inclusive, where they can feel valued, where they can feel energized and empowered to bring their whole self to work. And that becomes really, really important when we think about faith and people wanting to make sure that they can practice whatever it is their faith. And that plays a role in who they are as an individual. And that comes to our third point around the intersection of interfaith with the other dimensions of diversity. No one person is one aspect or one component of a dimension of diversity. We're all different dimensions of diversity. I'm a Black female who's a Christian faith. There are others who may be in the LGBTQ plus community, or they're of different races and backgrounds, or different genders, or different disabilities that they may have. Whatever the dimension is of diversity, it's all woven together. And what's included in that is the intersection of faith. And so we know that in this complex environment that we live in, our companies are just a microcosm of the external world. And so we know we need to make sure that we're able to meet the needs and meet our employees where they are, whoever they are, and however they identify, from the standpoint of that intersection of who they are and the different dimensions of diversity. And then the growth of faith or spirituality that's brought on by the pandemic. I've been reading a lot of articles over the course of the last couple of years where their spirituality is becoming more intense over the course of this pandemic, especially those that have already been close and a part of their faith and their spirituality is a very important component of how they identify. That has just grown over the course of the pandemic. And it's brought on by, I think, a lot of different things from the standpoint of mental health and stress and having to deal with that. Many people latch on and they really lean on their faith and their spirituality to help them through this very trying and challenging times, as we have seen in the pandemic, from being shuttered in place in our homes, away from family, friends, and colleagues, from the standpoint of we're not able to go into the office place and see others and congregate and share with others. And then also even from the standpoint of those of us that do attend various different churches or synagogues or mosques or wherever we might go to share with others in our faith, not being able to do that during the course of the pandemic. And so we've had to either watch our services virtually or we've had to link together virtually with different groups to try to make sure that we have that connection from a faith and spirituality standpoint. And so in many, many different cases, the growth of faith and spirituality has been brought on by the pandemic. So interfaith and religion should be an important aspect of our strategies. I said that earlier. And so what do we mean by that? How should you look at faith and religion as part of your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies? Well, you should look at it very holistically. And when we say holistically, through multiple dimensions, from the standpoint of your people and your culture, from the standpoint of business and customer insights, and then third, from the standpoint of social and corporate responsibility. And what I'd like to do over the course of the next few minutes is talk a little bit about each of those three areas and why it's so important and what some components of these three areas might be when it comes to your diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. When we think about people and culture, you want to make sure that you're promoting religious workplace rights and accommodations within the workplace. People and employees have different faiths, different religions that they are a part of and how they identify. And so we want to make sure that we're not just promoting one particular religion or faith, but we want to make sure that we're promoting the many different religious faiths that might be brought on in a workplace that are encompassed by all of the employees that we have. And so that means that we not just acknowledge Christmas, but we acknowledge all the different religious holidays that people have as a result of their faith and their identity. You want to support the development of interfaith affinity or resource groups. We have, as the statistics showed earlier, we have affinity groups and resource groups that encompass many different dimensions of diversity across gender and ethnicity and race and disability and many, many different others. But we know that we should have one that is based on faith and religion. And at Merck, in our company, we have an interfaith organization, an employee resource group that we leverage on many, many different occasions. And it has helped our employees of various different faiths come together and feel empowered to be who they are and how they identify in our workplace. You want to be able to promote interreligious education and understanding as well. And that helps to promote an understanding and an appreciation of different religious faiths within the workplace, and helping to understand how one faith might be different from another, and just being able to have that understanding and being able to embrace different faiths within the workplace, being able to conduct those education and those awareness webinars or lunch and learns or webcasts that you might have or in-person settings is very, very important in being able to create an inclusive workforce and workplace in the environment and culture. You want to enable effective and respectful communications within diverse teams as well. And what I mean by that is respect, having respect for different faiths and how people identify across the different spectrum of religions is very, very crucial to having an inclusive culture within an organization. And so you want to be able to leverage religious education and understanding, and that will enable respectful communication across the different faiths that you have within an organization. And even those who are agnostic or atheists as well, but having the respect of how people believe and what they believe is really, really critical to having an inclusive environment. And then around people and culture, celebrating religious and cultural diversity as a corporate enabler is really, really important. You want to be able to celebrate the various different diversity that exists across the faith within the company, because it allows people to fully embrace who they are. It allows people to feel empowered and energized in the workplace because they feel like they are being valued for what they believe in, and they feel like they have a sense of belonging in the workplace. And that is so very, very critical and crucial to having a diverse and inclusive workplace. When it comes to business and customer insights, people might think, well, how does faith play a role when it comes to business? Well, that is really, really important. You have to understand your faith-based customer base and the impact that they have on your business. We know that those across the spectrum, across the different faiths that exist across the globe, those are your customers. And those are millions and millions and millions and millions of people. And so being able to understand that customer base is really, really important when you think about your business. And also, likewise, you should understand the buying power of your faith-based customers. What are their interests? What is it that they need? Doing market surveys to understand that. So you can put marketing strategies together, sales strategies together, research strategies together, so you can make sure that you're able to really access those customers and understand and really link to them and close that gap between what may exist between your company and what they offer and your faith-based customers. You should seek input from employees across different faiths on business and people strategies. That becomes really, really important. If you want to understand your customer base and the faith-based customer base, then you should really leverage the employees across the different faiths in your organization. And they can provide that feedback. They can provide all of that information to you to help you bridge the gap between your organization and that customer base. They can provide you with insights that you can integrate into your marketing and sales strategies. They can provide you with concepts. And it also, what it does is it makes them feel valued within the organization and a sense of belonging, because you have latched onto them and inquired not just about their functional skills and capabilities, whether they're a good engineer or scientist or marketer or salesperson, but you've also leveraged their culture and their faith to integrate into those business strategies. And it really, really allows them to bring their authentic self, their true self to work and add value to the business. And then one of the things that is really, really important as organizations are heading back into the workplace and they're deciding different COVID-19 vaccination mandates and what comes with that, with religious exemptions, educating your employees around what is a religious exemption, and really pulling in your resource groups, your interfaith resource groups, or your employees of different faiths, bringing them together to talk about what that means from the standpoint of religious exemptions and sharing and learning from them so you can incorporate that into if you have vaccination mandates. Really, really, again, an important way for employees to feel a part of the organization, a part of the business, a part of the culture, and to really make an impact as well into your business and customer insights. And thirdly, you really should be able to leverage faith and religion into your corporate and social responsibility aspects of your strategies. You should be able to understand the viewpoints of your faith-based customers and the impact they have on your reputation and on your brand. That becomes really, really important. Understanding those issues from a responsibility standpoint, from a corporate responsibility standpoint, from an ESG standpoint, but understanding those issues so you can make sure that you understand them and you can link your strategies to them. And then also understanding the role your organization plays and understanding the issues impacting the faith-based community. What are some of those obstacles and barriers to your organization and the gaps to them really being able to see the benefit of some of the issues that they have within their community? What's getting in the way from them being able to experience certain things that are central to the core of the foundation of your corporation? But understanding the issues impacting the faith-based community is really important for all organizations to be able to leverage in their corporate and social responsibility strategies. And then also a key important aspect is to partner with external organizations to implement different programs and initiatives that are going to help the organization and then also help the faith-based community and also those external organizations. And as an example, we have a very, very strong partnership with Tanenbaum. And that partnership goes back, it predates me. And I've been in this role as the head of diversity and inclusion for our company for 8 years. And so this relationship with Tanenbaum has been in place for a very, very long time. And it really has helped us, and I know it's helped me personally, as we go about working to put together religious understanding trainings and webinars. And I talked about how important that is to be able to put these webinars in place to educate our employees around various different faiths and helping them to understand and learn about different faiths of their colleagues so it can create more of an inclusive environment and an environment that is foundationally built on dignity and respect for others. And Tanenbaum has helped us with various different training, webinars, and seminars that we have with our employees to help to educate them. They've counseled us on our religious accommodations policies and really helped from the standpoint of us thinking more holistically about accommodations that we have in the workplace, whether that be prayer rooms and putting those in place across our facilities across the globe, or just thinking about various different accommodations, as I talked about earlier with the COVID vaccine mandates that we have in place in our organization, and really helping us to understand religious exemptions and also helping us to bring that into and integrate that into our vaccine strategy. They help us to understand cross-industry best practices. And when I go to them and I say, what's happening across different companies when it comes to this issue or that issue, and they're able to engage in a conversation around, here's what's happening, here's some of the industry best practices, and here's what this company has done, and this is what made it successful, or here's some of the missteps that they've shared with us and some of the lessons that they've learned along the way. And that has helped us just so much as we put together our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies encompassing faith and religion. And then we wanted to do a comprehensive religious and cultural competency assessment within our interfaith EBRG. And they helped us to put that together. And that helped us to sort of get a grounding as to where we were and how mature we were as an organization when it came to competencies and capabilities around interfaith. And once we had that baseline assessment, it helped us to put strategies in place and plans and initiatives to really help us to grow as an organization from the standpoint of interfaith and inclusion from that perspective. And so our partnership with Tanenbaum has been something that has helped us to really build our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy to a point where it is very inclusive. It is taking into account all of the different dimensions of diversity, and very importantly, all of the different dimensions of faith that exist among our employees. And then lastly, I talked about our interfaith EBRG, Employee Business Resource Group is what we call them within our organization. And it's one of 10 employee business resource groups that we have within our company. And the mission of our Interfaith Employee Business Resource Group is that it embodies an inclusive community that celebrates diversity of faith, traditions, and philosophies for all of our employees from all spiritual paths and backgrounds. We are called by our common humanity to act with kindness and compassion, to serve as agents of good works throughout our company, our communities, and the world. And we are so very proud of our interfaith organization. We've had one now for 10 years and over 10 years now. And it has been such a powerful, powerful component to our people and our culture strategies, our business strategies, and our external strategies as well. And we're very, very proud of the path that they have forged with our employees as part of our overall employee business resource group family and as part of our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. And so just some closing thoughts. Religion and faith continue to play an increasingly important role in our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. We know that religion and faith and the concepts that surround it are evolving. It is really, really important from the standpoint of the role that religion and faith plays externally in the world around all of the social, political, and economic issues that we face around the world. We know that religion and faith are evolving, and we have to make sure that we understand that evolution, that we integrate it into our workplace and work policies and our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies, especially with the increasing complexity of religion and faith. We have to make sure that we are integrating faith and religion into our DE&I strategies across all of our companies. And if we don't do that, then we are doing a disservice to our employees. And then lastly, the impact of religion and interfaith are going to continue to be a foundation and a cornerstone of our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And so that I want to say thank you to Tanenbaum, to all of the leaders of Tanenbaum for inviting me to be able to talk a little bit about interfaith and religion and the important role that it plays in our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. Thank you.